Good evening. This is Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight, the Congress has moved the Supreme Court against the Cabinet's move to impose President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh. The President has also asked the Home Ministry why there is an urgency to do this now. The BJP says there's a constitutional crisis in the state. They had no choice. The question is whether central rule in Arunachal is justified or unconstitutional, as the opposition claims. Also, the Padma Awards have been announced, and one of this year's high-profile awardees, Anupam Kher, will join us as we debate whether it's fair to say these awards are politicized, no matter which government is in power. But first tonight, the President has asked the government what the urgency is to impose President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh, since the case is currently being heard in the Supreme Court. The BJP says there's a constitutional crisis, but the Congress has taken the battle to the top court, which will now hear its plea on Wednesday.
A Congress delegation at Rashtrapati Bhavan complaining to the President against the BJP government's move to impose central rule in Congress-ruled Arunachal Pradesh. But even before that, Home Minister Rajnath Singh was called by the President to explain the government's rationale for using this emergency power and whether there was any urgency and breakdown of law and order in the state.
That is a moral, political and constitutional. Congress is having no right. They will reach to Supreme Court, as we have said. They will reach to Rashtrapati Bhavan, but they will not call the session. Neither they will call the meeting of their legislative party.
The crux of the standoff is this. While the centre claims the law and order situation has deteriorated, the Congress alleges this is an attempt to destabilize a non-BJP government in the state. The centre says the assembly has been locked by the Speaker. The Congress maintains the assembly was to convene in January. The centre also says the governor is under attack by the state government. The Congress counters, accusing him of a partisan role and creating the crisis. It's also a clash of personalities between the governor and the chief minister. The governor, J.P. Rajkhawa, is a retired Assam cadre IAS official who the Congress alleges is acting on behalf of the RSS and the BJP.
This government is hell-bent on destabilizing all state governments where a non-BJP government is in power.
The crisis has seen unprecedented scenes like this. An assembly session called outside the official hall. The 8-week-old crisis is being heard by the Supreme Court anyway, and now the Congress has also appealed to the top court to challenge President's rule.
A number of questions that President Pranab Mukherjee wants answered before he takes a considered view on whether to impose President's rule in the border state of Arunachal Pradesh. Either way, this decision will have to be ratified by both houses of Parliament. With camera person Vijay Singh Patwal, Sunil Prabhu, NDTV.
Well, the question is whether the decision to impose President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh then is, as the Congress is calling it, in a sense, pushing out a duly elected government, or whether there's a genuine constitutional crisis that does require President's rule to be imposed in the state. We have Sambit Patra of the BJP joining us tonight. Shekhar Gupta here in the studio with us. Also with us, Senior Supreme Court Advocate Sanjay Hegde. I'll begin with Shekhar Gupta on this. You actually welcomed caution on this particular issue earlier today. Why is that?
Look, because a lot that has happened in Arunachal is very messy. We are not helped by the fact that there is inadequate reporting in the national media on Arunachal. But from every account, it is quite evident that the governor has been partisan. He's a wonderful man. I have known him for a long time. He's an honest man. But he's being very partisan right now. Because the minimum that was required was to force a count in the assembly. So call a session, have an assembly. But the way it was done last month, a session was forced, it was held in some other place, etc., 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 leaves no doubt that this was a
murky.
Not just murky, but this was a deliberate operation. Now, government may have fallen under its own weight. There was an assembly session due this month. That governor could have waited for that session to take place. I think now things are very messed up, and anything the government does now will have very little credibility. Although I'll wait for the president to take a decision, but I really think the government has handled it very, very poorly. The governor has handled it very, very poorly.
Let's ask the constitutional expert then. Sanjay Hegde, Is the government well within its rights? Is the cabinet well within its rights to recommend central rule in Arunachal, just purely by what the law says?
Purely by what the law says, the cabinet always has the option of president's rule. And here is a case where the assembly could not meet for a period of 6 months. That is also because this matter has already reached courts. There were court orders saying hold the assembly, don't hold the assembly, and all that. The point is that president's rule is always an option, especially when the situation gets murky in the way Shekhar says. Here, what is more or less evident is that there has been a failure to have a head count within the assembly for whatever grounds. It's obvious that the Congress probably does not have the numbers. It will have the numbers if certain people are disqualified, if that disqualification is upheld, and so on and so forth. In these circumstances, given the fact that the assembly has not met for 6 months, given the fact that that obviously the chief minister probably does not command a majority in the house, and given also the fact that with so many court interventions, it's not very certain as to when you can actually hold the assembly, president's rule is an option which judicial review of any decision to go into president's rule is rather limited.
So that's very interesting what you're saying. You're saying that they were well within their rights to do it, and that given the circumstances, the fact that the assembly hadn't met, this is actually really the only choice that the cabinet had?
This is one of the choices that the cabinet had. Now, obviously, if I was arguing on the other side, you could argue a pattern in as much as the governor took overactive interest in things, in pushing people to hold an assembly, no matter that he disregarded the fact that the assembly itself could not be convened in the assembly house itself. All these things, they do form a pattern. But at the end of the day, you just take this one decision separately. What do we do now? Do we let the situation continue? Or there is the option of 356. The 356 option is available to any central government.
That's very important what you say. So legally and constitutionally, Sanjay Hegde, Sambit Patra is saying that perhaps this was really one of the few options that the government, that the cabinet had to suggest imposition of president's rule. But the point that Shekhar Gupta made, and even Sanjay Hegde is pointing out, the circumstances in which things have evolved in Arunachal Pradesh over the last couple of months have been extremely murky, have been extremely questionable, which is why the case is also currently pending in the Supreme Court. Has this been a case of just absolutely terrible timing and messaging by the government?
No, in fact, one has to consider the facts as it is. Number one, yes, Shekhar is absolutely right in stating that things have been quite... I have a very bad echo. Please get that echo right to the PCR. Now let me continue. Number one, yes, things have been absolutely murky. Where the murkiness lied, one has to see that. Number one, if you would see that in the 60-member assembly of Arunachal Pradesh, 47 belong to the Congress, 21 of them broke out as a rebel group. Naturally, when 21 of the Congress people fall out, it's the Congress party which is responsible for the muddied water. It's not the Bharatiya Janata Party which in fact created this kind of instability. It is the Congress party, the fallout within, because the finance minister was sacked by the chief minister, and most of the dissidents went with the finance minister.
This is the truth of the matter. On the floor of the House. I mean, right now, this is what we appear to know to be the case. So there has to be a floor test, A.
Absolutely right.
And what was the need for the governor to sort of, I hate the word prepone because it doesn't exist, but we use it all the time, to, advance the assembly date to December, even though it was supposed to be a month later. The assembly was supposed to meet a month later in January. Isn't that questionable?
You have to understand, exactly, you have been absolutely right in stating that a floor test had to take place to know which of them enjoys the majority. Number one, as pointed out by the constitutional expert Mr. Sanjay Hegde, that the Article 174 categorically states that the assembly has to meet within this time period of 6 months. What happened over here was 21st July 2015 was the last time when the assembly had convened. In fact, going by that standards, 21st January 2016 was the last date before or till which the assembly should have been convened. But 16th and 17th, in keeping with the preponement done by the governor, 16th and 17th was the date when the assembly was scheduled to meet, and they met. Well, they were supposed to meet on the floor of the said assembly, but could not, because in fact the speaker through a letter said that the assembly should be sealed and assembly should not be allowed to be convened in the premises of the assembly. So a community center was used to hold the assembly. Now remember,
But that's
on 16th, the
that's
speaker...
that's absurd. I mean,
That's a hijack.
Yeah,
That's a hijack.
I mean, where is the last time you saw an assembly
No,
session
but-
being held in a community center where a governor
do you
called an
know-
assembly
but
session
do you
without telling
know,
the chief minister and the
Nidhi-
council of ministers? Submit a very honest question. Just seriously, do you really believe
No,
that the
Nidhi,
governor
you
has
have to know
acted
one thing. The court
completely
has upheld this.
impartially?
The court
Has the
has
governor
upheld
acted
this.
impartially in Arunachal Pradesh? Has the governor conducted himself
The court
above board?
I wanted to come in. I just got the
Remember-
connection.
One second, Dr.
I just
Jayakumar.
got the connection. I would like
just
to-
want
Can I
Sambit to answer this
can I
question. I'll come to the
complete?
rest of
Can
the
I-
panel. Yes, Sambit.
Can I complete
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Number
Sure, go
one,
ahead.
both the 16th and 17th resolution of the assembly, which met outside, was upheld by the Guwahati High Court. So going by that standard, if you see that the assembly had conveyed within 6 months, because 16th and 17th of December
it's a
falls
total
within
bluff.
this time period of 6
It's a
months.
total
Dr.
bluff.
Jayakumar of the Congress
if
wants
the
to come
chief
in.
minister...
Okay, Dr. Jayakumar,
No, let me
the BJP
complete.
is
Yeah,
citing the
yeah.
High Court order.
Mr.
What the High
Sambit
Court said.
Patra
Go
is giving
ahead.
it totally wrong.
Go ahead, sir.
What the Guwahati High Court said was the action of the governor. Please listen. The action of the governor was tainted, and the governor is
But then
not
we went,
worthy.
but the
of
governor went to the
holding
court again, and that
constitutional
was
position.
that.
This
No,
is the
that was the
this is
first
the
view.
observation
What
of
was the
High
review?
Court,
Please tell the
and
review.
It had cancelled all the actions of. Please.
Okay,
Mr.
one at a
Patra, I
time,
did not
one at a
intervene.
time.
Allow me to speak.
Okay,
Allow me to
okay.
speak.
Okay, Dr. Jayakumar, go
I am
ahead.
facing problem with the. I am facing problem with the audio. Please hold on. The governor was censured by the High Court of Guwahati, and they set aside all the actions of the governor, and then the matter has gone to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, in the history of India, within 12 hours
Wrong.
of receiving the application,
False.
taken up the matter and constituted a constitutional bench. The constitutional bench is on day-to-day basis going on the case, and every day the argument is going on. And the counsel of the governor, before the Chief Justice of India and before this bench, said that no precipitative action would be taken until such time this bench decided this particular case. What is the urgency for the Honorable Prime Minister to call for an unscheduled meeting yesterday morning between the visit of the France Prime Minister, President, and going to Chandigarh? With all these things, he has considered it is so essential and passed an order that they recommended for the President rule. Where is the urgency for it?
Let me
Where
ask,
is the law and order failure?
Let me take
No,
what,
Was there
let me
just
take
a
any
what you're
single
saying
bullet fired?
to a veteran
No, one more,
parliamentarian.
Mr.
K.C.
Headless.
Tyagi is
Mr.
joining us.
Only
One
Nidhi,
second,
Nidhi,
gentlemen.
Nidhi,
Mr.
only
K.C.
one
Tyagi
Nidhi,
of the
only
JDU
one
is
Nidhi,
joining
yes,
us.
sir.
One
Nidhi,
second,
10
gentlemen,
seconds.
please. If I could please
Mr.
request everyone to just
Mr.
one
Jayakumar
moment.
has
I'm
put
taking this to
wrong
Mr.
facts.
I'm bringing the mics down. I'm bringing this to Mr. Tyagi. Tyagi ji, you are a veteran parliamentarian. आपने ये बहुत से किस्से देखे होंगे जहाँ पे इस तरह का विवाद होता है 356 को लेकर. लेकिन त्यागी जी, आप मुझे बताइए कि यहाँ पे हमारे साथ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एक्सपर्ट बैठे हैं. वो कहते हैं कि ये जायजा है कि अगर 6 महीने बीत चुके हैं असेंबली सेशन के, तो दे आर वेल विद इन देयर लीगल राइट्स टू इम्पोज प्रेसिडेंट्स रूल. त्यागी जी.
मैं कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एक्सपर्ट से और जो मेरे मित्र हैं भारतीय जनता पार्टी के, जिनके साथ लंबे समय तक हमने कांग्रेस पार्टी से यही लड़ाइयाँ लड़ी हैं, उनसे मैं 2-3 सवाल पूछना चाहता हूं कि क्या श्री प्रणब मुखर्जी श्री नरेंद्र मोदी और कैबिनेट के कुलीग से पूछे बगैर लोकसभा बुलाने की स्थिति में है? यदि हाँ तो गवर्नर ने ठीक किया, यदि ना तो गवर्नर ने गलत किया. नंबर 1. नंबर 2, स्पीकर के यहाँ जो सुबह मीटिंग होती है उसमें कोड और प्रोसीजर के तहत दिन भर की कार्रवाई तय होती है। क्या प्रणब मुखर्जी साहब सदन के अंदर क्या एजेंडा पहले लिया जाएगा ये तय करने की स्थिति में है? क्या 68 साल में किसी गवर्नर ने या किसी राष्ट्रपति ने लोकसभा की या विधानसभा की जो संभावित कार्रवाई है उसका एजेंडा तय किया है? जो राजखोसा साहब ने तय किया कि सबसे पहले नॉन कॉन्फिडेंस लिया जाएगा स्पीकर के खिलाफ और जो डिप्टी स्पीकर है वो प्रिसाइड करेगा। नंबर 3, क्या कभी किसी राष्ट्रपति ने या किसी गवर्नर ने अशोका होटल के बार रूम में, ताज होटल या ताज मानसिंह के बार रूम में कभी किसी एमएलएज की मीटिंग बुलाने के लिए किसी को अधिकृत किया है? या इंडिया इंटरनेशनल सेंटर में? वेरी करेक्ट। नहीं, मुझे बोलने दीजिए। जो वहां पर एमएलएज की मीटिंग हुई है जिसको संवैधानिक मान्यता गवर्नर ने दी है, वो एक वहां के 5 स्टार होटल के बार एंड रेस्टोरेंट जिसका नाम है उसके अंदर मीटिंग हुई है। क्या ये जो 50-60 साल की 68 साल की जो हमारी संवैधानिक मान्यताएं हैं क्या ये उसके अनुरूप है? और ऐसे काम जब कांग्रेस पार्टी करती थी, जिस तरह से कल्याण सिंह जी को हटाया था, जिससे नीतीश कुमार जी को बूटा सिंह ने हटाया था, हम एमएलए लेकर के यहाँ पर राष्ट्रपति के यहाँ आए थे आडवाणी जी के नेतृत्व में। क्या हमारे बीजेपी के मित्र, क्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एक्सपर्ट ये भी भूल गए कि एसआर बुमई केस के बाद ये तय हो गया है कि बहुमत है कि नहीं है, ये विधानसभा के अंदर तय होगा?